Country's in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this.
The alliance between America and Ukraine has been pushed to breaking point.
You got to be more thankful. Because let me tell you, you don't have the cards.
President Trump says he wants to end the war in Ukraine. Now he's in a war of words with President Zelensky.
But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out.
The fallout's gone down well in Moscow.
Vladimir Putin believes he has the upper hand.
Donald Trump seems to have handed Russia what they wanted.
And it's not just Ukraine that's alarmed.
We'll ask whether the rest of Europe is ready for what comes next.
Donald Trump's message to Europe is you've got to become much more self-sufficient.
Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister tells us we must face this new reality.
Russia is a threat to Europe, a threat ultimately to the United Kingdom. It's a generational moment for us to step up.
After a dramatic week in Washington, Trump now blames Zelensky for putting world peace in danger.
You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
So how did we get here?
Я практично кожен день приходжу. І от коли я йду сюди, я ніколи не кажу, що я йду на цвинтар. Кажу, що йду до Іринки.
Oksana's daughter Irina had been serving on the Ukrainian front line.
Тому що насправді тут таке є місце сили, місце гордості, звитяги. І одночасно так, втрати, але перемоги.
Irina had volunteered as a paramedic and filmed her experience for Panorama.
Ми працюємо і евакуйовуємо поранених безпосередньо з поля бою. І в машинах наших бойових надаємо їм повний спектр допомоги.
Коли вона там мала багато евакуацій, вона була найщасливіша людина в світі, бо вона привезла живих.
Я боюся загинути, бо я знаю, що це зруйнує мою маму і мого батька. Це буде ударом, який вони можуть не витримати.
Irina was killed in May last year. Oksana isn't the only one who comes here to mourn her.
Нещодавно на Марсовому прийшов чоловік. Став на коліна, цілує ту могилу Ірину. Дружина мене обіймає, каже, так, вона врятувала мого чоловіка.
Irina's one of more than 500 Ukrainians buried here. More than 46,000 Ukrainian soldiers and 12,000 civilians have been killed since 2022.
Kyiv awoke to sirens.
This is the Russian war machine kicking into gear.
Vladimir Putin launched an all-out assault on this country.
After the full-scale invasion 3 years ago, Ukraine faced extinction as an independent country.
Besieged by Russian forces, fear is spreading.
I don't think there was any Western NATO power that thought Ukraine would hold on for so long.
Russian forces looked likely to take the capital, Kyiv, but Ukraine fought back. A counter-offensive reclaimed almost half the land initially taken by Russia. But today, Russia still controls nearly 20% of Ukraine's territory.
It's tempting to describe this war as a stalemate. The problem is that Russian forces on the ground are making progress. And if things go on and nothing changes, the legitimate fear is that Ukraine would experience a significant military crisis sooner than the Russians.
From the beginning, foreign military aid has been crucial to Ukraine's survival.
Hundreds of missiles have already been sent to Ukraine, along with anti-tank weapons, guns and ammunition.
At the start of the war, President Biden said we were going to do everything we can to support Ukraine.
The Biden administration's overarching strategic policy was ensure that Russia loses.
America has given Ukraine about $120 billion worth of aid, more than 40% of the total amount. That's been consistent with the role the US has played for 80 years as the primary guarantor of European security. But now, all that looks set to change. As a presidential candidate, Donald Trump promised he could end the war.
And I'll tell you what, I will have that war finished and done and settled before I get to the White House as president-elect. I will get that done.
It didn't quite work out like that.
The 47th President, Donald J. Trump.
Once in office, Trump repeated his determination to end the war. But it's not just the bloodshed he wants to stop. In a historic shift in US foreign policy, he also wants to stop bankrolling the defense of Europe.
They're way below us in terms of money, and they should be paying at least equal. They should really be paying much more than us.
Richard Haass is a former White House advisor. He says President Trump has long resented European reliance on American might.
Before his first term, I had talked to him when he was a candidate. I had briefed him. And his principal concerns were about allies not doing enough.
He's got this sense of grievance that we in the United States are saps. People are taking advantage of us.
Donald Trump's message to Europe is you've got to become much more self-sufficient. The era of unconditional, unlimited American military aid has essentially come to an end.
Ending Ukraine's dependence on American aid meant trying to get a deal quickly. Within a month of taking office, Trump called both Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin.
We had a great call, and it lasted for a long time, over an hour this morning. I also had with President Zelensky a very good call after that. And I think we're on the way to getting peace.
As American and European leaders met in Munich to discuss security 2 days later, Trump announced he would send a team to begin negotiations with Russia without Ukraine.
No decisions about Ukraine without Ukraine. No decisions about Europe without Europe.
The UK has been an important ally of Ukraine since the outbreak of the war.
Prime Minister.
Very nice to see you.
I met the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, in Downing Street 2 weeks ago. Can I start by asking you about the talks that have already started? Do you approve that President Trump has begun talks with Russia about ending the war without including Ukraine?
I think the objective is to get peace in Ukraine, and that's the objective of the president. It's my objective, it's the objective of the Ukrainians, and there's obviously got to be a process involved in that. I think what's important is that obviously Ukraine needs to be involved in those talks.
But they weren't. In Saudi Arabia 2 weeks ago, it was Trump's team and Russian officials discussing how to end the war in Ukraine.
I came away today convinced that they are willing to begin to engage in a serious process to determine how and how quickly and through what mechanism can an end be brought to this war.
Trump had little sympathy for complaints that Ukraine wasn't invited to the talks.
Today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it.
Tension was rising between the two leaders. There now appeared a real risk of Zelensky losing crucial military aid.
Can Ukraine survive without U.S. military support?
Very, very difficult. And of course, in all the difficult situations, you have a chance, but we will have low chance to survive.
In Kyiv, after 3 years of war, there was dismay and fear.
Я не хочу думати про найгірше. Я все-таки вірю в те, що Україна вистоїть. Але, звісно, без підтримки нам буде важко.
Про перемовини, які Америка начебто почала з Росією, це, не знаю, це просто неприйнятно. Проводити переговори без обох сторін.
It was particularly tough for those who'd already lost loved ones.
Це неймовірно боляче буде усвідомити, що людина, з якою я мала створити родину, просто віддала своє життя даремно.
In Moscow, the reaction to the Saudi talks was positive, a sign things were going Putin's way.
С американской стороны были открыты для переговорного процесса, без всякой предвзятости, без всяких осуждений.
The noises coming from the Trump administration were playing into Putin's long-term ambitions for Ukraine.
Putin's maximalist aim is to conquer Ukraine. It's the aim he had in February 2022, that is a Ukraine controlled by Russia, by a pliant government that is under Moscow's thumb. I think he's willing to make short-term concessions in order to buy time and to pursue it. But I think that maximalist aim is ultimately still the one that guides much of his decision-making today.
For more than 15 years, Putin has said that Russia has a historic claim over Ukraine. He spent 30 minutes explaining this to one American interviewer.
The Bolsheviks started building the USSR and established the Soviet Ukraine, which had never existed before.
Right.
So in this sense, we have every reason to affirm that Ukraine is an artificial state.
Putin talks about Ukraine as an artificial state that existed at the sufferance of Russia. I think without that ideological underpinning, you would not have Putin take the grave step of invading.
Putin's view of Ukraine is it's Russian, one way or the other. It's part of imperial Russia. I think it's fundamental to who he is.
John Sullivan was America's ambassador to Russia when it invaded Ukraine in 2022.
There's no negotiating with him, and he will never compromise his war aims. He will never compromise, because his view is we, Russia, built all that's good in Ukraine. That's ours. That's Russian. You are us, we are you.
Whatever Putin's long-term aims for Ukraine, there are cracks in his military operation. An estimated 95,000 fighters have been killed, and there are other consequences.
Many assume that Russia holds all the cards. Its size alone gives it a huge battlefield advantage over Ukraine. But there are signs that Russia's hand may not be as strong as it might appear.
President Putin may once have been head of the KGB,
but the country's transition is bringing with it a prosperous new Russian class.
20 years ago, Putin's post-Soviet economic reforms brought prosperity for some.
Russia is flush with cash, the ruble strengthening.
Russia has acquired 10 new billionaires in the past year alone.
During the first decade of the 21st century, money came in, the economy recovered, and there were good times. Ordinary Russians did welcome the influx of consumer goods, the opening of the economy, the ability to travel, especially for the elite. It was a good time for the elite.
But now the party's over. Economic sanctions imposed after the full-scale invasion have placed the economy under strain.
You could say that Russia's economy is running on fumes. It now spends somewhere in the region of 8% of its GDP on defense and security. That's enormous. The official inflation rate in Russia is somewhere in the region of 11–12%. In practice, it is much higher than that. So the Russian economy is surviving, but it is not thriving, and it may be storing up serious problems.
Russia's economic situation could have presented America with leverage to pressure Russia into concessions. But instead, Trump put pressure on Zelensky and then insulted him.
A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Gotta move fast.
Things were going wrong over a potential deal that would grant the US rights to exploit Ukraine's vast mineral deposits. Trump saw it as payback for US support.
No, what I'm saying is the following. They have tremendously valuable land in terms of rare earth, in terms of oil and gas, in terms of other things. I want to have our money secured because we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars.
It's ungenerous, it's blackmail, and it's bullying. None of us went into supporting Ukraine for a mineral deal. We did it because it's the right thing to do, to stand up to, effectively a fascist bully that was invading a European country.
Zelensky refused to sign, but left open the possibility of a deal if he could get better terms. Relations between the US and Ukraine were deteriorating. In Moscow, it was a different story.
Вы видите, мы все видим, как стремительно меняется мир, обстановка в мире. В этой связи я отмечу, что первые контакты с новой американской администрацией вселяют определенные надежды.
Putin's hope was that a Trump-brokered ceasefire would help to consolidate the territorial gains he'd made since his first land grab in Ukraine. Russia took Crimea and some territory in the east of Ukraine in 2014. After the full-scale invasion 8 years later, it claimed ownership of 4 Ukrainian regions, even though it didn't have complete control of them. Putin has said that any ceasefire must recognize all of this territory as Russian. There's not much pushback from the Trump administration. It says it's unlikely Ukraine will get back all the land it's lost.
Do you agree with the Trump administration that it's unrealistic for Ukraine to expect to get the return of its territory?
This is why Ukraine needs to be at the table, because that has to be something where we listen hard to what the Ukrainians want, and that's why they must be at the table.
But I'm still not clear whether you agree with the Trump administration on that it's unrealistic for Ukraine to get that territory back.
I think the objective of President Trump is to bring about the end of the conflict. I agree with that objective.
Granting territory to Russia rewards aggression. That's sending a shiver of alarm through a nervous Europe. I've come to Poland. It shares a 330-mile border with Ukraine.
In the UK, the prospect of foreign invasion may be so distant as to be unimaginable, but Poland is a frontline state in the new conflict between Russia and a Ukraine that's backed by the West. The need to defend Poland against the resurgent threat from the East is taken very seriously indeed.
11,000 young Polish civilians have signed up to take part in this military training scheme, known as Holidays with the Army.
Do you think that the invasion of Ukraine in 2022 changed civilian attitudes in Poland to the importance of defense?
Na pewno zwiększyła myślenie o zwiększeniu potencjału obronnego Polski, to tak.
Tak jest! Roluj, roluj! To gdzieś to zagrożenie nadal jest. Uważam, że na pewno trzeba się na tym skupić, bo nie wiemy tak naprawdę, co nas czeka w przyszłości.
Poland's strongest defense against Putin is not these volunteers, but membership of the world's biggest military alliance.
The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, was founded after the Second World War to defend the European democracies against the threat of invasion by the Soviet Union. When the USSR fell apart in the early 90s, many of the European countries that had once controlled and dominated joined NATO at the first opportunity. To date, no NATO country has ever been invaded.
Ukraine wants to join its allies, including Britain, France, Germany and the US, in NATO to guard against future attacks from Russia.
Right now, inviting Ukraine to join NATO will strengthen us diplomatically and bring us closer to real and, what is very important, fair peace.
Ukraine tried to make NATO membership a condition for a peace settlement.
Volodymyr Zelensky wants Ukraine to be a member of NATO. He believes that there is no substitute for the alliance's Article 5 mutual defence clause that says an attack on one member of the alliance is treated as an attack on all.
Russia doesn't want another NATO member on its border and has said Ukraine should never join. Trump agrees.
They've been saying that for a long time, that Ukraine cannot go into NATO, and I'm okay with that.
So if Ukraine's not going to join NATO anytime soon, how would a ceasefire be maintained? Trump's very clear that the job would fall to European, not American forces.
Well, if we have a peace deal, I think having troops over there from the standpoint of Europe, we won't have to put any over there because, you know, we're very far away.
But the Prime Minister told me any deal without the security guarantee of US military support will be worthless.
It is vital that the US continues that leading part in NATO and in relation, for example, in Ukraine, to any guarantees that may have to be put in if there is a peace deal, because I don't think it'll be a guarantee worthy of the name guarantee if we don't have that.
But you seem to be reluctant to acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is that the Americans have said absolutely explicitly, we are no longer the primary guarantor of European security. That puts us into a radically different geopolitical situation. It's the end of 80 years of that kind of transatlantic commitment.
Well, I don't think the Americans are withdrawing from NATO. I do think that when it comes to European security, then it is right for the European countries to step up in terms of spending capability.
The Prime Minister says that from 2027, defence spending will increase from 2.3% of GDP to 2.5%. After inflation, that's more than £6 billion extra per year.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War.
It sounds like a lot, but is it enough?
That would be enough just to stand still. It wouldn't be enough to fix the things we need to make ourselves more deployable, more ready, and to be able to plug the gaps if the Americans leave.
The Prime Minister hoped that tackling this long-running US complaint about defence spending would go down well with Trump when he went to the White House last week.
Well, I think we have just a great relationship, and I'm very impressed with him and very impressed with his wife.
But when it came to a security guarantee for Ukraine, not much more than warm words.
If they need help, I'll always be with the British, okay? I'll always be with them. But they don't need help.
Whenever necessary, we absolutely backed each other up, and that's at the
Could you
core
take on Russia by yourselves?
Well...
The next day, another visitor to the White House, also hoping to get a US security guarantee.
President Zelensky has arrived at the White House. There we go, a warm handshake.
In return, Zelensky was now prepared to sign a renegotiated minerals deal.
We look forward to getting in and digging and working and getting some of the rare earth.
At first, things seemed friendly.
Of course, we count that America will not stop support, and of course the infrastructure or security guarantees.
But Trump wasn't willing to offer any military backup. And when Zelensky said that no ceasefire would hold without it, Vice President J.D. Vance went on the attack.
The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy.
What kind of diplomacy, J.D., you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
With the world watching, the alliance between Ukraine and America was unraveling. Trump lost his temper, and Zelensky didn't keep his cool.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War III.
What do you
You're
think about-
gambling with
what do you
World
think
War III. And
You-
what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
My immediate reaction was one of dismay. I thought it was a pretty appalling spectacle that you have the President and the Vice President turning on a guest in the Oval Office who's a head of state, leading a country that's been at war for 3 years and suffered enormously in the process.
But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out.
So it's very unsettling. And you've got this country that has been the strongest country in the world since the end of the Second World War, and it's gone rogue.
Mr. President, is there no deal? Mr. President, can you tell us what happened?
Afterwards, President Zelensky was asked to leave the White House by Trump's team.
He's got to say, I want to make peace. He doesn't have to stand there and say about Putin this, Putin that, and all negative things. I want it to end immediately. I want a ceasefire now. He says, oh, I don't want a ceasefire. Well, all of a sudden, he's a big shot because he has the U.S. on his side.
After the bust-up in the White House, President Zelensky flew to London to meet the Prime Minister. Later, he met other European leaders. They're now drawing up a plan, including a coalition of the willing, to provide a European security guarantee, if there's a peace deal. For Zelensky and Europe, maintaining the security relationship with America remains vital.
Я думаю, що наші відносини будуть продовжені. Ми розраховуємо на допомогу Сполучених Штатів Америки. Безумовно.
The stakes could not be higher. If Putin gets his way in Ukraine, the impact could be felt far beyond its borders.
It would have enormous consequences for the nature of the world. We don't know if Mr. Putin would stop there. We don't know what precedents it would set. I would worry about what China would read into it, what North Korea would read into it. If anyone thinks that would be the end of it, they are living in a fool's paradise.
In Ukraine, they're under no illusion about the danger of Putin's ambitions. If America pulls away, they fear there'll be nothing to hold Russia back.
Тому що це не конфлікт, не війна за території, не війна за людей. Це є просто імперські амбіції. Треба мати цілковите розуміння, що якщо Росія ніколи не зупиниться,
On BBC iPlayer, it is